Welcome to National Eyes. Please subscribe and hit the bell icon for more breaking updates. Tonight, we turn our attention to a crisis that could not only redraw Africa's map of power, but also send shockwaves across continents. The fate of millions, the stability of entire nations, and the delicate balance of peace in a volatile region all hang in the balance as tensions escalate over a single, vital resource. The Nile, the world's longest river, winding over 4,100 miles through 11 countries, is more than just a waterway. It is the lifeblood for over 100 million people, a source of food, energy, and hope. Today, it stands at the center of a dangerous standoff that threatens to upend lives and reshape the future of Africa. For thousands of years, the Nile's annual floods brought life to Egypt's deserts, turning barren land into fertile fields. But now, that ancient certainty is slipping away, replaced by anxiety and fear, as water levels fluctuate and the river's future becomes uncertain. At the heart of this crisis stands a colossal engineering feat, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam. Built on the Blue Nile, this massive structure is changing the river's flow, igniting a geopolitical firestorm that has drawn in not just Ethiopia and Egypt, but the world's attention. This is far more than a simple water dispute. It's a struggle for survival, a battle for national pride, and a contest that could shift the balance of global power. The stakes are nothing less than existential for those who depend on the Nile's waters. Ethiopia's urgent need for electricity and development now collides head-on with Egypt's existential dependence on the river for drinking water, agriculture, and industry. The dam promises prosperity for some, but threatens catastrophe for others. After years of tense negotiations and failed talks, Ethiopia has begun operating the dam on its own terms. Egypt, feeling cornered, calls this a direct threat to its very existence, raising the stakes to unprecedented levels. Diplomatic channels have all but gone silent, replaced by ominous warnings, military posturing, and a growing sense of urgency. The risk of conflict looms larger with every passing day. The world is watching closely as these two giants, Egypt and Ethiopia, stand at a precipice, their destinies intertwined with the river that now divides them. The outcome will shape not only their futures, but the fate of the entire region. In the next minutes, we'll unpack the roots of this crisis, explore what's truly at stake, and examine the possible outcomes that could define the future of the Nile and the millions who depend on it. To truly grasp today's crisis, we must first understand the Nile's profound and enduring role in shaping Egypt's identity, culture, and very survival. For millennia, the river has been the heart of Egyptian civilization, its waters nourishing the land and sustaining generations. The Nile is not just a river to Egypt, it is a symbol of life itself, woven into the nation's history, mythology, and daily existence. Egypt's existence has always depended on the river, a belief cemented by colonial-era treaties that granted it near-total control over the Nile's waters. These agreements, shaped by foreign powers, reinforced Egypt's sense of entitlement and security, making the river's flow seem like an unchangeable right. The 1929 and 1959 agreements allocated almost the entire flow of the Nile to Egypt and Sudan, leaving Ethiopia, the source of nearly 85% of the river's water, without a seat at the table. These treaties ignored the needs and voices of upstream nations, sowing seeds of resentment that would grow over decades. Ethiopia has long viewed these treaties as outdated relics of colonialism, imposed without its consent and denying its legitimate rights to the river. For Ethiopians, the Nile represents not just water, but hope for development, dignity, and a future free from external control. For decades, Egypt enforced its dominance, using political and even military pressure to maintain the status quo. Meanwhile, Ethiopia, weakened by internal conflict and poverty, lacked the means to challenge this historic imbalance, watching as its own people struggled while the river flowed beyond their reach. But the 21st century brought dramatic change. Ethiopia's rapid economic growth and newfound political stability fueled a bold vision to harness the Blue Nile's power for its own development. The country began to dream of using the river to generate electricity, irrigate fields, and lift millions out of poverty. The dream of a grand dam, the Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam, became a powerful symbol of self-determination and national pride for Ethiopia. It promised not just energy, but a chance to rewrite history and claim a fair share of the Nile's bounty. For Egypt, however, this vision was a nightmare. The prospect of an upstream power controlling the Nile's flow threatened the country's very lifeline, raising fears of water shortages, agricultural collapse, and national insecurity. These competing narratives, Egypt's deep-rooted sense of entitlement and Ethiopia's urgent quest for justice, have fueled public anger and political tension on both sides, setting the stage for confrontation and mistrust. The conflict over the Nile is rooted in centuries of history, but its consequences are unfolding in real time, shaping the lives and futures of millions across the region. The Grand Ethiopian Renaissance Dam is Africa's largest hydroelectric project, a symbol of hope for Ethiopia. It promises to double Ethiopia's electricity output, powering homes and industry, and lifting millions from poverty. But for Egypt, the dam's massive reservoir is a source of dread. Its filling could drastically cut water to Egypt, threatening agriculture and livelihoods. Egypt demands a binding agreement on dam operations, especially during droughts. Ethiopia resists, seeing this as an attack on its sovereignty. Years of negotiations have failed, with each side blaming the other. In 2024, Ethiopia filled the reservoir and began unilateral operations. Egypt saw this as the final straw. The standoff has now reached a dangerous new phase. As of October 2025, the Nile crisis has reached its most dangerous point. Egypt's government calls Ethiopia's unilateral dam operations a direct threat, warning that all options are on the table. Cairo has taken its case to the UN, framing the dispute as a matter of human rights and international law. Ethiopia remains defiant, insisting the dam will benefit the region and accusing Egypt of clinging to colonial-era privileges. Both sides have ramped up rhetoric and military readiness, with satellite images showing increased activity near bases. Sudan, caught in the middle, faces risks and potential benefits but is destabilized by its own internal crises. The region is a powder keg, with global powers watching closely. Without a diplomatic breakthrough, the risk of miscalculation is dangerously high. The world is on edge as the Nile's fate hangs in the balance. The GERD crisis is redrawing alliances across Africa and the Middle East. Egypt has rallied Arab League support and leveraged its role in Gaza peace efforts to gain Western and Gulf backing. Ethiopia, meanwhile, is building ties with East African neighbors and global powers like China and Russia, who support its development ambitions. Sudan, wedged between rivals, faces both opportunity and peril from the dam's operation. Its internal instability and refugee crisis complicate its stance, making it a potential flashpoint. The Nile dispute is now a global issue, with new geopolitical lines hardening. The stakes extend far beyond the river's banks. The economic fallout from the Nile crisis could be catastrophic. Egypt's agriculture, employing 60% of its workforce, depends entirely on the river. Even a small reduction in flow could devastate crops and trigger unrest. The country's economy is already battered by inflation, falling Suez Canal revenues, and external shocks. A water crisis would force Egypt to import more food, driving up global prices and threatening stability. For Ethiopia, the dam is a path to prosperity, powering industry and generating revenue from electricity exports. But escalating conflict could scare off investment and trap Ethiopia in poverty. Instability in Egypt or Ethiopia would disrupt global trade and energy markets. The world cannot afford a Nile disaster. Behind the headlines, the Nile crisis is a human story. In Egypt, millions of farmers face water rationing, shrinking harvests, and the threat of losing their livelihoods. A water shortage could spark mass migration to overcrowded cities, straining social services and fueling unrest. Egypt also hosts hundreds of thousands of Sudanese refugees, compounding the humanitarian crisis. In Ethiopia, the dam represents hope, electricity for villages, opportunities for business, and national pride. Families have invested in the project, seeing it as a path out of poverty. For Ethiopians, the GERD is not a weapon, but a lifeline. The crisis is about real people, on both sides, whose futures hang in the balance. The stakes are deeply personal. Experts warn that the Nile crisis is a long-foreseen conflict, fueled by decades of mistrust and failed mediation. Dr. Marwa El-Shanawi stresses that Egypt needs a binding agreement to secure its water. Without it, the situation remains unstable. Michael O'Hanlon notes that, unlike other regional crises, the Nile dispute is deeply rooted in national identity and history. Both sides' unilateral actions and legal threats are a recipe for confrontation. Experts urge immediate de-escalation and a new negotiation framework, overseen by a neutral third party. The solution must balance Ethiopia's right to develop with Egypt's need for water security. The window for peaceful resolution is closing fast. The Nile dispute is more than a water conflict. It's a test for Africa's future and a warning for the world. The river, stretching thousands of miles, connects nations, cultures, and millions of lives. Its fate is intertwined with the hopes and dreams of people who depend on it every day. The choices made at this crossroads will echo far beyond the riverbanks. The decisions taken now will determine whether the Nile continues to be a source of life, prosperity, and cooperation, or if it becomes a flashpoint for conflict and division. Communities along its banks have thrived for centuries, but they now face uncertainty as tensions rise. The international community must act. The cost of inaction is too high. If the world turns away, the consequences could ripple across continents, affecting food security, migration, and regional stability. Global leaders have a responsibility to support dialogue and peaceful solutions. A new approach, based on mutual benefit, transparency, and adaptive management, is needed. Only through open communication and shared responsibility can trust be rebuilt and lasting agreements forged. Success here could set a global example for water cooperation, showing that even the most complex disputes can be resolved through partnership. But failure would send a dangerous message. That power and force decide the fate of shared resources in a world facing growing scarcity. The story of the Nile is a story about all of us, in a climate-stressed world. As droughts and floods become more common, the lessons learned here will shape how humanity adapts to a changing planet. How this crisis is resolved will reveal our capacity for compromise and peace. It will test whether nations can put aside differences for the greater good, and whether people can unite around a shared future. The river has sustained civilizations for millennia, nurturing the rise of great cities and cultures. Its waters have witnessed the triumphs and struggles of countless generations. The challenge now is to ensure it can do so for generations to come. This is a moment to choose hope over fear and cooperation over conflict. What do you think is the path to peace on the Nile? The answer may shape not just the future of Africa, but the future of our interconnected world.